The first time the princess called her just the fat kitchen girl, half the court laughed. The servants pretended not to hear. That was what they were best at, swallowing insults along with the steam from the pots. But the words hit Isolde harder than any hot oil ever had. She stood there in the doorway of the great hall, flowers still on her arms, apron stretched over a body everyone thought they had the right to judge. Trays of steaming bread trembled in her hands while Princess Ilara lounged on a cushioned chair, one slippered foot resting carelessly on a low stool. "Look at her," Ilara said loudly, pointing so the nobles would follow her gaze. "Mother, you cannot expect us to eat anything touched by that. She belongs in the kitchens, not near our table." The queen's eyes flicked from her daughter to the cook. A single, unreadable glance. And then, nothing. No scolding. No defense. No punishment. The court took the silence as permission. From that day on, Fat Kitchen Girl became a joke that walked on two legs. What no one knew, not the princess, not the nobles, not even the guards, was that Isolde stood in that kitchen on the queen's direct secret order, and the heart being tested was not the cook's. The castle of Elderwin always smelled of something cooking. In winter it was thick stews and roasted meats. In summer it was fruit tarts and spiced pastries, the air sweet enough to make the guards on the walls swallow hard as the breeze carried the scent past them. If the kingdom had a heartbeat, it pulsed in the kitchens. Isolde knew every rhythm of that room. She knew the crackle of logs in the great stone ovens, the hiss of water hitting hot iron, the sharp clatter of knives too close to fingers. She knew where the floor dipped and where the smoke curled stubbornly instead of rising. She knew, too, the way eyes slid over her like she was part of the furniture. A large necessary object that did not need to be looked at directly. Isolde was not small. Her arms were thick and strong from kneading dough and lifting heavy pots. Her hips and belly filled her simple dress in ways that made gossip flicker in corners. Stretch marks traced pale silver rivers along her skin. A thin burn scar ran from her left wrist to her elbow, a souvenir from the day a boiling pot slipped. She was not graceful like the ladies in the tapestries, but her hands were steady. Her food never failed. And the queen had told her, the day she arrived with a letter and a quiet voice, "I need someone the court will underestimate." Back then, Isolde hadn't understood. She'd just been grateful for a job that came with warm bread and a bed. Now she understood a little too well. "More salt," she murmured, dipping a spoon into the pot and tasting. "It has to carry to the back of the hall, or the king will think the stew is tired." "Should I slice more onions?" asked Miri, a young scullery maid who followed Isolde like a nervous shadow. "Yes, and remember, not too thick." Isolde smiled faintly. "We want them to melt, not fight." Miri nodded, cheeks flushed from the steam. "You always know what they want up there," Miri said as she chopped. "But they never even look at you when the plates go out." Isolde shrugged, busy tying off the top of a pastry. "They don't need to," she said. "They have the plates." Miri hesitated. "I heard the princess called you something again yesterday," she blurted. "When you brought the honey cakes." Isolde's hand paused only for a moment. "What did you hear?" she asked. "That she said that you were just the fat kitchen girl. That you should be grateful anyone lets you in the hall at all." Miri's mouth twisted. "I hate her when she says things like that." Isolde pressed the edge of the pastry down with her thumb. "Princes and princesses say many things," she said quietly. "Our work doesn't change because of their tongues." But when Miri turned away, Isolde closed her eyes for a heartbeat. Just the fat kitchen girl. The words clung like grease. The first time Princess Ilara had said it, Isolde had been walking past the high table, a tray of fresh loaves balanced on her arm. The hall had been full. Knights, nobles, visiting merchants. Laughter bounced between the stone walls like coins tossed on a table. Ilara had been bored. Boredom, Isolde had learned, was a dangerous thing in the hands of someone who had never gone hungry. "Look at that one," Elara had said, pointing with a jeweled finger. "Truly, the castle is generous. We feed our pigs in the kitchens now." The words had landed like blows. A few nobles had chuckled behind their hands. Others had looked away, pretending not to hear. The Queen had been there too. Queen Adelaide, regal, calm, eyes like still water, had watched the entire scene with an expression so smooth it might have been carved from marble. She had said nothing. That silence had cut deeper than any insult. Isolde had felt her cheeks burn, her throat tighten. But she had kept walking, kept placing the bread on the table. Her hands did not shake. Only her heart did. Now, in the familiar heat of the kitchen, she forced the memory aside. "Is the roast ready?" she called. "Almost," shouted one of the spit boys. "Then move," Isolde said. "Tonight is the princess's name day. If anything is cold, they will blame us, not the candles." At the mention of the name day, Miri's eyes shone. "They say there will be new dresses," the girl whispered. "Jewels from the Southern Isles, a song written just for her." "They also say the flour delivers itself to the ovens," Isolde replied dryly. "I haven't seen that happen yet." Miri giggled, tension easing. The royal name day feast was an enormous undertaking. For weeks, extra deliveries had arrived. Sacks of fine white flour, wheels of cheese, barrels of honey and wine. The kitchen had become a storm of flour and fire, Isolde at its calm, sweating center. She moved from station to station, adjusting seasoning here, turning a roast there, rescuing a sauce on the verge of burning without a word of scolding. This was where she was most herself, hands moving with practiced confidence, mind juggling heat and time and taste. In the kitchen, no one cared that her waist did not fit into silk. They cared that the bread rose and the meat did not dry. As the sun dipped and the bells began to ring for evening, the castle stirred. Servants rushed with fresh rushes and candles to the great hall. Musicians arrived, tuning instruments. Knights changed into their dress armor, polishing buckles until they gleamed. Isolde stood at the threshold between kitchen and hall, wiping her hands on her apron. "Remember," she told Miri and the others, "we carry plates, not opinions. Let them say what they wish. We will make sure they cannot say the food was bad." Miri nodded, biting her lip. "What about when they talk about you?" she asked in a small voice. Isolde's smile was tired but kind. "Then they have given their tongues something to do while their stomachs are quiet," she said. "It is better that than the other way around." It was almost true. Almost. The great hall blazed with candlelight. Banners of red and gold hung from the high rafters, embroidered with the royal crest. The long tables were lined with plates and goblets, the air thick with the smell of roasted meats, sugared fruit, and hot bread. At the far end, on the raised dais, King Rowan and Queen Adelaide sat side by side. Rowan's beard was silvering at the edges. Adelaide's hair was braided and crowned with a simple, elegant circlet. Between them, in a gown of pale blue silk, glittering with tiny sewn pearls, sat Princess Elara. She was not ugly. Her features were delicate in the way of someone who had never been tired from work, only from boredom. Her hair fell in perfect waves around her shoulders. Her hands were soft, fingers adorned with rings she did not need. Her eyes, however, were sharp as glass. As the guests settled, Elara's gaze wandered, not to the visiting lord from the north, not to the bard tuning his lute, to the door where the servants would enter with the food. "Where is she?" Elara muttered. Her maid, standing just behind her chair, blinked. "Who, Your Highness?" "The fat kitchen girl," Elara said without lowering her voice. "I want to see if she's waddling more than last time." The maid's cheeks colored. "Princess, perhaps you should remember your place," Elara snapped, flicking a crumb from the table with a manicured nail. The queen's eyes slid sideways, catching every detail. Still, she said nothing. A moment later, the doors at the back of the hall opened. The first wave of servants entered, carrying platters. Among them, carrying a tray laden with steaming loaves and bowls of herb butter, walked Isolde. Her dress was the same plain brown as always. Her apron, a fresh white, strained just a little across her middle. A smear of flour still dusted one cheek she hadn't noticed. Her heart beat a little faster than usual. She hated name days. She hated the way the hall felt more like a stage than a room, the way eyes followed her not out of hunger for food, but hunger for something to mock. She kept her gaze down, counting her steps, careful not to jostle the girl beside her. "Look," Ilara said loudly, "the kitchen sends us our favorite hog." Laughter scattered along the high table. Isolde's hands tightened on the tray, but her feet did not falter. She could feel the queen's gaze on her now. Cool, measuring, like a hand testing the strength of a bridge. "Tell me, girl," Ilara called, as Isolde came close enough that everyone could hear. "Does the oven complain when you stand too near? Or does it thank you for blocking the draft?" Snickers erupted. Isolde set the tray down carefully on the side table near the dais. Her cheeks burned. Her chest ached. Words crowded in her throat. Sharp, desperate things. She swallowed them. "Answer when you're spoken to," Ilara demanded, tone sugary and cruel. "Or are you too busy thinking about your next bite?" Isolde's eyes lifted just for a moment. They met the princess's. Then, deliberately, they shifted. To the queen. Adelaide's face was calm, but in her eyes something flickered. Permission, not to speak, to endure. Isolde bowed her head. "No, Your Highness," she said quietly. "The oven does not complain." Ilara smirked, victorious. "Well, perhaps it should," she said. "It's the only thing working harder than your belt." More laughter, more heat crawling up Isolde's neck. She stepped back, hands empty now, and melted into the line of servants against the wall. She was used to being a shadow. What she was not used to was the way the queen's voice suddenly cut through the hall a few moments later. "Enjoy your feast," Adelaide said, rising gracefully. "Tonight we celebrate my daughter." Applause followed. "But soon," the queen went on, "we will need more than pretty gowns and sweet words to keep this kingdom from crumbling." The room shifted, confused. Ilara frowned. Isolde felt a chill crawl along her spine. The queen's gaze swept the hall. "Some of you," she said, "have forgotten how to see the worth of those not seated at this table." Her eyes brushed Isolde like a touch. "Tonight is for celebration," Adelaide finished smoothly. "Tomorrow we will begin correction." The nobles laughed uneasily, unsure whether it was a jest. Ilara rolled her eyes, bored again. Isolde's hands curled into fists at her sides. Correction. She had no idea what the queen meant, but she had a feeling, whatever it was. She was standing right in the middle of it, and the test had already begun. They just didn't know who was being tested yet. The name day feast went on late into the night. Music swelled and broke, goblets emptied and filled again. Guests drifted between laughter and gossip. Servants wove between chairs like threads in a tapestry, and Princess Ilara basked in the glow of her own celebration. Isolde kept moving, back and forth from kitchen to hall, carrying dishes that vanished as quickly as she set them down. Her feet ached, her back burned. Her face hurt from keeping her expression carefully blank. But it was not her body that tired first. It was her patience. Every trip past the dais was another risk. "Mind the plates," a guard muttered once as she passed. "Wouldn't want one to crack under all that weight." "Careful," a noblewoman whispered to her neighbor. "If she falls, she'll crush half the table." They laughed as if she couldn't hear. She always heard. At one point, as Isolde bent to place a fresh tray of sugared fruit before the royal family, Ilara leaned close enough that only the high table could hear. "Tell me, kitchen girl," the princess said, voice honeyed and sharp, Do you ever stop eating long enough to cook? Rowan glanced sideways, a faint frown tugging at his brow. Isolde kept her eyes on the tray. Yes, Your Highness, she replied quietly. Otherwise there would be nothing for you to criticize. Why? A few nobles choked back surprised snorts. Ilara's eyes flashed. What did you say? She demanded. Isolde's heart lurched. She hadn't meant to let that slip, but the words had climbed over her teeth without asking permission. Years of swallowing insults had finally left a crack. I said, Isolde replied, forcing herself to look at the princess now, that I stop eating long enough to cook, so there is something on your plate. A dangerous silence settled over the high table. Rowan's brows lifted, surprised. And something else. Admiration perhaps, but buried deep. Ilara's mouth curled. You are bold for someone the palace dresses in sacks, she said. Do you think your wit makes you less large? Isolde felt every eye on her. The queen's most of all. Adelaide's gaze was steady, but there was a question in it now. Not will you endure? Something closer to, how will you answer? Isolde could have bowed, could have apologized, could have retreated. Instead, she took a breath and spoke clearly, so the nearest tables would hear. No, Your Highness, she said. My wit does not make me smaller, but it seems my size makes it easier for some to overlook their own lack of substance. A soft gasp rippled down the table. Ilara's cheeks flushed a delicate, furious pink. You dare? She started. Enough, Queen Adelaide said. Her voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. The air in the hall shifted as if someone had opened a window in a storm. Tonight is for celebration, Adelaide continued. Not for testing how far a princess can stretch her cruelty before it snaps. Ilara stared at her mother, stunned. Rowan cleared his throat. Perhaps we... Be quiet, Rowan, Adelaide said pleasantly. You've drunk too much to be wise and too little to be brave. The king blinked, then laughed weakly, raising his hands in surrender. The court shifted uneasily. No one had ever seen the queen speak this sharply in public. Her calm was famous, her patience, legendary. If she was using words like this now, something was shifting beneath the polished surface of Elder Wynn. Adelaide rose from her chair. Stand up, Isolde, she said. Isolde froze. She had not knelt. But the queen's words pulled her spine straight anyway. The cook stepped closer to the dais, hands folded nervously in front of her apron. You know my name, Adelaide said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Your Majesty, Isolde replied. You used it. The day you gave me this position. A whisper moved through the hall. Gave her. Most had assumed Isolde had simply appeared in the kitchen like every other servant. A name on a list, a body in an apron. Adelaide's lips curved faintly. You have been in my kitchens for... How long? She asked. 3 years, Your Majesty, Isolde said. 3 years, Adelaide repeated, turning to the hall. 3 years of feeding you all. Winter and summer, famine and plenty, storm and sunshine. She let her gaze rest briefly on each cluster of guests. How many of you, she asked mildly, know her name? Silence. Nobles shifted uncomfortably. One lord cleared his throat, then thought better of speaking. Adelaide nodded slowly. That is what I thought, she said. Ilara folded her arms. Mother, why are we wasting time on a kitchen girl when this night is supposed to be... Yours? Adelaide asked, looking at her daughter. Yes, it is. And that is why we are not wasting time at all. The bard in the corner quietly stopped tuning his lute. Every servant in the room stood a little straighter. Adelaide descended the few steps from the dais, her gown whispering against the stone. She stopped in front of Isolde. Up close, the queen was not otherworldly or untouchable. Tiny lines ringed her eyes and mouth. Not from frowns, but from years of holding her face still, while others exposed their worst. "Isolde," she said gently, "when I placed you in this castle, do you remember what I told you?" Isolde swallowed. Her voice came out softer, but clear. "You said you needed someone the court would underestimate," she replied. "Someone they would not notice until it was too late." Gasps rose. A knife had just appeared in the room. Not the steel kind, the kind made of truth. Ilara blinked rapidly. What is she talking about?" Adelaide did not look at her. "Do you know why I needed that?" the queen asked Isolde, though her words were for everyone. Isolde hesitated. "Because," she began slowly, "you said, the true shape of a heart is seen most clearly when it believes no one important is watching." Adelaide smiled for the first time that night. A small, sad curve. "Yes," she said. "Exactly." She turned to the hall. "For 3 years," Adelaide announced, "this woman has worked in my kitchens under my direct order, not only to feed your mouths, but to watch your hearts." The great hall erupted in murmurs. Some voices rose. Offended, confused, defensive. "Watch us? Test us? What does she mean?" Ilara stared at her mother as if she'd grown another head. "You placed a cook to spy on us?" she demanded. "On me?" "No," Adelaide said simply. "I placed a cook to see you. There is a difference. Spies report secrets. Isolde reports something far more dangerous." She lifted her chin. "She tells me," the queen said, "who you become when you think the person in front of you is beneath your notice." The words hit harder than any accusation. At one of the side tables, a knight shifted uneasily, remembering every time he'd snapped at a scullion for spilling water. A merchant stared at his hands, recalling how often he'd mocked the kitchen staff's accents. Ilara's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. "You cannot be serious," the princess finally sputtered. "She's just—" "Be very careful what comes out of your mouth next," Adelaide said, her voice turning to ice. "I have tolerated your temper because you are young, and because this court has never taught you to see past your own reflection. That ends tonight." The princess recoiled as if struck. Isolde watched, frozen. She had known the queen wanted to test hearts. Adelaide had told her that much, but she had never expected the queen to reveal it like this, tearing the curtain away in the middle of a feast. "What have you told her?" a noblewoman suddenly called, eyes bright with fear. "What has she said about us?" Isolde wanted to vanish. Adelaide answered for her. "She has told me," the queen said, "who shares their bread with the servants when they think no one sees, who remembers names, who says thank you, who does not belittle those who fill their plates and clean their cups." She let that sink in. "And," she added, voice quiet but sharp, "who uses those same people as targets when they are bored, who calls them fat and useless and pigs, forgetting that without them, all their jewels and gowns would mean very little in a cold, empty hall." Ilara flushed again, this time not with pride. "I was joking," she said weakly. "You're overreacting. She doesn't care, do you?" She turned to Isolde, eyes desperate. "You don't care. You're used to it." "You people are used to it." Isolde's chest tightened. "You people." She thought of Miri, hands red from washing pots. Of the spit boys, arms aching from turning meat all day. Of the man who scoured soot from the ovens and went home every night with lungs full of ash. There was no such thing as getting used to being less than human. There was only learning to survive it. Isolde met Ilara's eyes. "I care," she said softly. Ilara flinched as if slapped. Adelaide nodded once. "This," the queen said to her daughter, "is why I brought her here, not to feed you. Anyone can be taught to do that." She turned fully to Ilara now. "Isolde was not placed in this kitchen because she is less," Adelaide said. "She was placed here because she is more." The room stilled. "More patient," Adelaide continued, more observant, more forgiving than you deserved. When she first came to me, I asked her if she would be willing to stand where the arrows of your carelessness would fall, so I could see exactly how you aimed them. Isolde remembered that day. You will be judged, Adelaide had warned her then, but you will not be the one on trial. Now, as the hall held its breath, the Queen finally turned judgment where it belonged. Tonight, she said, I have my answer. She looked at the assembled nobles. Some of you, Adelaide went on, treat my servants with honor. You thank them. You defend them when others mock. Your names are written here. She tapped her temple. A few people visibly relaxed. Others, she said, eyes narrowing, have taught me that if I were to lose my crown tomorrow, I would not trust you to lift me from the floor. Her gaze lingered on one lord who had sneered just an hour before, calling a page dog for dropping a goblet. He looked suddenly smaller in his expensive clothes. And you, Adelaide said at last, turning to Ilara. My daughter. Ilara straightened, chin trembling. You are not cruel because you are evil, the Queen said, voice gentler. You are cruel because you have never been told no and never been shown yourself. That is my failure as much as yours. She stepped closer. But if you are to wear a crown one day, Adelaide continued, you must understand this. The way you treat those who serve you is the truest prophecy of the Queen you will become. A heavy silence fell. So, the Queen said, let us start rewriting that prophecy. She lifted her hand and, to the astonishment of the entire hall, reached for Isolde's flower-dusted fingers. Isolde of Elderwyn, Adelaide said clearly, from this night, you do not stand only in my kitchens. Isolde's heart thudded. You will continue to oversee the meals of this castle, the Queen said. But you will also eat at my table once each week, by my decree, so that my daughter may learn to look someone in the eyes when she speaks, instead of down at their apron. The hall exploded again. This time not in laughter but in shock. A cook at the Queen's table. Ilara's mouth dropped open. You cannot be serious, she breathed. Mother, people will talk. Yes, Adelaide said. Let them. It is time they had something worth saying. She squeezed Isolde's hand once before letting it go. And as for you, my daughter, Adelaide finished, your lessons begin tomorrow, at dawn, in the kitchen. Ilara recoiled. The kitchen? You want me to stand where Isolde stands, Adelaide said, and hear what she hears. To feel what it is to be spoken to, as if you are invisible and yet responsible for everyone's comfort. Her eyes were cool but not unkind. You will not be recognizable, she added. We will see how the court treats you then. The princess stared, horror and disbelief warring on her face. Rowan, to his credit, did not argue. He just sighed deeply and said, Don't burn the bread, Ilara. It's the only thing that makes those council meetings bearable. A ripple of nervous, genuine laughter broke the tension. Isolde stood, hands shaking, the edges of this new reality still too bright to look at directly. She had thought the Queen's test was about the nobles. She hadn't realized. It was also about what the crown would become. And she was not only the witness, she was part of the answer. Word spread through the castle faster than smoke. By morning, everyone knew. The fat kitchen girl had a name. The Queen had said it out loud. The princess had been ordered to the kitchens. Some said it was madness. Others, genius. Some muttered that the Queen had always been too soft. Others, that she had finally sharpened the right edge. Isolde woke before dawn, as always. Her body moved through familiar motions, pulling on her clothes, tying her apron, plaiting her hair back from her face. But everything felt slightly wrong, as if the walls had grown a fraction taller and the floor a fraction softer. When she entered the kitchen, Miri nearly dropped a bowl. Isolde, the girl hissed. Is it true? The queen and the princess and you at the table? Yes, Isolde said simply, tying her sleeves. All of it. But the ovens don't care about gossip. Light the fires. We have work. Miri grinned, cheeks flushed with excitement as she ran to her tasks. By the time the first pot began to simmer, the door creaked open. Princess Ilara stood on the threshold. She was not in silk today. Someone, likely the queen herself, had dressed her in a plain brown dress and a white apron. Her hair, usually artfully arranged, was tied back in a simple knot. There were still rings on her fingers, though. Old habits die hard. The room went silent. Every servant, every boy turning spits, every girl scrubbing pots, stared. Ilara stiffened. "Stop looking at me," she snapped automatically. No one moved. Isolde stepped forward. "Your Highness," she said, bowing her head. "Welcome to my kingdom." Ilara's brows knit. "Your… what?" Isolde gestured around them. "The kitchens," she said. "Where your food is born, where your plates are cleaned, where your comfort is kneaded, boiled and scraped from pans. Up there, you have your court. Down here, I have mine." A few servants hid smiles. Ilara's mouth tightened. "I don't see why this is necessary," she muttered, stepping further in. "Mother is being dramatic." "The queen," Isolde corrected gently, "is being deliberate." She handed Ilara a wooden spoon. "For today," Isolde said, "you stir." Ilara looked at the spoon as if it were a snake. I've never… "I know," Isolde replied. "That is the problem we are attempting to fix." She led the princess to a large pot near the main hearth. Inside, onions and carrots sizzled in butter, filling the air with a mouth-watering smell. "Stir slowly," Isolde instructed. "Keep it moving so nothing burns. Not too hard or you'll break the vegetables. Not too soft or the bottom will catch fire." Ilara frowned. "You speak as if the pot cares." Isolde smiled faintly. "Everything cares," she said. "If you mistreat it long enough." She stepped away to check the bread. For the first few minutes, Ilara stirred with stiff, grudging movements. Then the pot hissed. "Why is it popping?" she demanded. "Because you stopped," Miri said from nearby, surprised at her own boldness. "You have to keep going." Ilara glared, then resumed stirring. Her arm began to ache. Heat crawled up her face. "Why is it so hot?" she muttered. "Because it's above a fire," Isolde said dryly. "You notice that faster from here than you do from the throne." A few quiet chuckles rippled through the room. As the morning wore on, Ilara's dress grew damp with sweat. Her hair escaped its knot. Flour dusted her sleeves when she tried and failed to knead dough properly. "Why does it keep sticking to my hands?" she groaned. "Because you're fighting it," Isolde replied, guiding her movements. "Not working with it." "I don't fight bread," Ilara snapped. "You fight everything," Isolde said calmly. "Especially people who cannot fight back." Ilara went silent. For the first time, she looked tired. Not the bored, restless fatigue of someone who has had too much comfort. The bone-deep tired of someone doing work they never considered had to be done at all. At midday, as platters went up to the hall, Ilara stood at the doorway, wiping sweat from her brow. She watched servants carry food that her hands had touched. "Do they know?" she asked Isolde quietly. "That it was me? That I helped?" Isolde shook her head. "They assume it was us," she said. Like always, Ilara stared at the backs of the servants as they disappeared into the great hall. "Feels unfair," she muttered. "To them," Isolde agreed. "Not to you." Ilara's jaw clenched. She didn't argue. That evening, when the main fire had burned low and only the embers glowed, Queen Adelaide entered the kitchen. Every servant bowed. Ilara nearly dropped the pot she was cleaning. "Mother," she blurted, "this is ridiculous. My hands. Look at my hands." She held them up, palms red and slightly blistered from heat and scrubbing. They're ruined." Adelaide took her daughter's hands gently, turning them in the light. "Ruined?" she asked softly. "No. Marked. There is a difference. These will fade." Ilara sniffed. "I don't see the point of any of this," she muttered. "You've embarrassed me. You've put a cook above me in front of everyone." "I did no such thing," Adelaide interrupted. "You did that yourself when you chose to treat her as less than human. All I did was correct the record." She released Ilara's hands and turned to Isolde. "You have done well," the Queen said. Isolde shook her head. "I nearly spoke out of turn last night," she replied. "I lost my temper." "Good," Adelaide said. "It means you still know the taste of your own dignity. I do not ask you to be a saint, Isolde. I ask you to be honest." She looked around at the watching servants. "For 3 years," Adelaide said, "you have carried my secret order. You have shown me more of this court than any advisor." She paused. "From this day," she went on, "that order changes." Isolde's heart skipped. "You are no longer only my eyes," the Queen said. "You are also my voice." Isolde's mouth went dry. I don't understand." Adelaide smiled. "You will dine at my table once a week," she said. "Not as a curiosity, as my counselor on matters of the heart. When Ilara speaks of laws, I will ask you how they will sound to the ears that must live under them. When the lords complain about taxes, I will ask you how often their servants have gone hungry this winter. The nobles would scream." Isolde knew it. Adelaide knew it too. "The court will not like it," Isolde said. Adelaide's eyes gleamed. "Good," she replied. "Their comfort has made them deaf. Your presence will be a noise they cannot ignore." Ilara stared between them, cheeks flushed. "You trust her more than me," she said, hurt cutting through the anger. Adelaide's expression softened. "In some things, yes," she said. "Isolde has spent her life hearing what people really say when they think it doesn't matter. You have spent yours hearing only what people think you want." She stepped closer, cupping her daughter's face. "But I am giving you both a gift," she said gently. "To you, Ilara, I give the chance to become a queen worth the crown. To her, I give what she has always had, but never been allowed to name." She glanced at Isolde. "Authority," the Queen said. "Not over them. Over the story she tells herself when they try to make her smaller." Isolde's eyes stung. She had never wanted power. She had wanted respect. It felt in this moment as if she were being handed a path that led to both. Slowly, carefully, one seat at a table at a time. Ilara swallowed hard. "What if I fail?" she whispered. What if I keep seeing her as the fat kitchen girl?" Isolde stepped forward. "Then," she said softly, "I will keep putting plates in front of you, until you learn to taste more than the food." A strained laugh broke from Ilara's throat. You're not supposed to talk to me like that," she said. "No," Isolde replied. "But you're not supposed to talk to me like you did either." For a moment they simply looked at each other. A princess and a cook, a future queen and a woman who had been shoved into the shadows of her world for years. 2 hearts, both under test. "Mother," Ilara said finally without sarcasm, "what will people call her, now that she sits with you?" Adelaide considered. "Some will still call her the fat kitchen girl," she said. "It will take time for their tongues to learn better." She looked at Isolde. "But in this castle," the Queen declared, "she will be known by her name, and by what she is." She held Isolde's gaze. "Royal taster of hearts," Adelaide said softly. "The one who tells us who we are when we think no one is watching." Isolde let out a shaky breath. It was a simple title, almost silly. And yet, it rang with a truth that settled deep. People would continue to judge her body. They would whisper, they would snicker, they would call her things that tasted like ash when she heard them. But now, when she walked through the great hall, she would carry something they could not see and could not take. The knowledge that the queen of the realm trusted her to see what crowns could not. Later that week, when Isolde sat for the first time at the queen's table, the room rustled like a field of wheat in a sudden wind. Some stared in outrage, some in fascination. Ilara sat opposite her, hands still red from a morning of chopping vegetables she used to throw away untouched. The princess looked at Isolde's plate, then at her face. "I like the stew," Ilara said awkwardly. Isolde hid a smile. "Good," she replied. "You stirred it." Ilara blinked. Then slowly she smiled back. It was small, imperfect, but it was a beginning. Around them, the noble court of Elderwyn shifted in their chairs, faced with a truth they didn't know how to swallow. That the woman they had called just the fat kitchen girl had been placed there, by the queen herself, to measure the weight of their souls. And when the queen raised her goblet that night, she did not toast jewels or banners or songs. She toasted something far rarer. "To those," Queen Adelaide said, "who carry more than we see, and to the day we finally learn to see it." Her eyes met Isolde's over the rim of her cup. For the first time in her life, Isolde did not feel too big for the room. She felt exactly the right size to fill the space her courage had carved, one insult endured, one truth spoken, and one secret royal order at a time.